asking about the conversion last night, an event no one expected, and no one really understood. Nicole sensed the sincerity in the way he mentioned it, as if he really wanted to help her understand something he himself had only vaguely guessed. However, she couldn't help but mention Leslie, who had been a close friend, now a disturbing mystery. She told him that she had gotten used to people hiding the truth from her, that it no longer hurt her as much as it used to, only made her colder, more guarded. Carlton was silent for a moment, then suddenly shared about his childhood fear of rabbits, a detail that sounded funny at first but contained a deep meaning. He said that when he was young, he witnessed his best friend being bitten by a rabbit until he bled, an image that haunted his mind for many years. She felt a sudden closeness, something she had longed for in the midst of the whirlpool of secrets surrounding her. Still, part of Nicole remained wary, as if her survival instincts were whispering that nothing was entirely random. Was Carlton sharing the story because he wanted to open up, or was he simply using empathy as a tool to lower her guard? In a world where everyone had something to hide, Carlton was no exception. He always showed up at the right time, said exactly what she was wondering, shared just enough to make her waver. And that made it even harder for Nicole to tell where the line between sincerity and cleverness lay. She remembered the look in Carlton's eyes when he talked about the rabbit, a little dark, not exactly sad, but as if he was weighing every word, every nuance. Not like a random memory, but like part of a plan or a deliberate attempt to inspire trust. But it was this doubt that tired her, because if she couldn't trust even a childhood memory, how could she continue to connect with anyone in this world? The rabbit story, seemingly trivial, opened up deeper layers of Carlton, or so he wanted her to see. Nicole found herself caught between two extremes, the emotional desire to trust and the rational desire to be cautious. In a flash, she realized that whether Carlton was truly sincere or not, it was her own inner conflict that she needed to face. Carlton was still there, silently waiting for her reaction, not rushing, not pushing. And that patience made it even harder for Nicole to distinguish between the truth and the mask put on by people who were too used to hiding. Nicole stood still for a moment, as if detached from reality. All the sounds around her seemed to be swallowed up in the long silence. She did not take her eyes off Carlton, but in her mind she replayed every moment he had appeared, at the right time, in the right place with the right words. The coincidence no longer seemed pleasant, but suspicious, as if it were all part of a game in which she was a pawn being pushed back and forth unconsciously. The story of the rabbit seemed harmless, an invisible thread that tightened the other person's defenses and then penetrated to the center of their vulnerability. Nicole was not a trusting person after all that had happened to Leslie, the person she had believed to be closest to her. And Carlton, no matter how perfect his cover was, could not overcome her instincts that something was wrong. She remembered Leslie's eyes the night before the conversion, trembling and fearful, as if she had seen something terrible, but could not speak. Thinking back now, Leslie's every expression at that time showed the presence of a force that Nicole herself did not dare to name. Carlton was different. He was not afraid, not confused. On the contrary, he always seemed to be in control. That was the scariest thing. People who are always in control do not do it because they are stronger, but because they know what will happen. And if Carlton really knew, then what role was he playing in this game? The protector or the director? Nicole felt her chest begin to tighten, not from fear, but from the cold alertness that was creeping through her. She couldn't let herself be led astray again, couldn't let herself take another step toward someone she wasn't sure was truly on her side. But at that moment, an image flashed through her mind. Carlton's arms catching a child who had fallen at the community gate the day before. The way he looked for the child's relatives. The way he removed his mask to help the child breathe. There were no cameras, no witnesses. The action was completely unnecessary if he was acting. So what was the truth? Nicole realized that the scariest thing about lying was losing the ability to tell what was real. If Carlton was sincere, she would lose her only chance to hold on to something. But if he wasn't who she thought he was, then trusting him would be the first step to collapse. That was when Nicole decided not to stand still. As if he had guessed what was going on in her mind, gently took a step back, without saying another word, and left. Not in a hurry, not with regret, but as if he had just completed part of a plan, or had just retreated from a battle that he did not want to win too soon. Nicole did not turn around, but she knew he was still watching, and from now on, every encounter would no longer be a coincidence, but a calculated step in the game between the two of them, where no one was allowed to be weak, and trust was no longer a luxury, but the most dangerous weapon. When Carlton suggested dinner to Nicole, to continue their meaningful conversation, Ted suddenly appeared behind her, walking over with a look that was both friendly and awkward. He placed a hand lightly on Nicole's shoulder, seemingly innocent but also possessive. He asked about the previous evening, specifically mentioning Leslie, as if to gauge her attitude and reaction. Nicole paused, but quickly replied that Leslie hadn't messed anything up, and that she was having a great time with Carlton, a vague response that any observant observer would have sensed as a gentle pushback toward Ted. Ted's gaze changed only for a moment, but enough for Nicole to realize that it was more than just curiosity. He wasn't looking at Carlton with the usual wariness, but something more insidious, a feeling that resembled long-suppressed jealousy. No one knows what stage Ted and Nicole's relationship is at. Only she knows that the silent distance has crept in between them like a small, seemingly harmless crack that is growing wider and wider. And now, Carlton's presence is not only a catalyst, but can become a reason for Ted's hidden suspicions to rise. The dangerous thing about Ted is not the outburst of jealousy, but the fact that he hides it. But the real danger lies not with Ted or Carlton, but with Leslie. Nicole knows that if anyone has reason enough to seek revenge, it is Leslie, the one who once stood by her side, who shared every secret, now on the sidelines, where all that remains are distorted memories and accumulated resentment. If Leslie really wants to hurt Nicole, she doesn't need to resort to violence. She only needs to target what Nicole is trying to hold onto: her honor, her happiness, the fragile balance between the two men who revolve around her life. With just one seed of doubt, Leslie could convince Ted that Nicole has betrayed her, or expose Carlton as a villain disguised as sympathy. But the most dangerous thing is the possibility that Leslie is not acting alone. A wild and risky theory suddenly flashes through Nicole's mind, that Carlton and Leslie may not be strangers at all. The similarities in their eyes, their silences, even their reactions to traumatic stories, all made her wonder. Could Carlton be someone Leslie had been close to? Or even the ex-husband she had never mentioned? Someone who had returned in a new guise, approaching Nicole to do something, destroy, manipulate, or overthrow the entire life she had been trying to preserve. If that theory was true, Nicole was in an invisible game where she was the only pawn who had not been told the rules. Leslie could have faked photos, edited text messages, or set up a situation to push Nicole and Ted into a serious case, like a well-staged sudden death with a trail of clues to both of them. A mysterious friend who died in an apartment Nicole had visited, a bottle of medication Carlton had prescribed, a late-night call from Leslie with a veiled confession, and then suddenly gone missing. In a society full of cameras and easily manipulated data, the truth becomes the most easily bent. And once all the evidence points to Nicole and Ted, they will not only face the law, but also the collapse of the trust they once had in each other. Nicole now thinks that she is choosing not simply between Carlton and Ted, but between survival and the destruction of everything she has ever known about herself and the people around her. She cannot be sure which side Carlton is on, cannot predict what Leslie will do next, and even more so when the truth is revealed, whether she herself will still be able to maintain her sanity to stand firm. In this dark game, every relationship is a double-edged sword, and she, no matter how smart she is, cannot stop what is coming. But one thing Nicole knew for sure: if Carlton and Leslie were really connected, they had planned this all along, and now the prey was starting to realize they were cornered. That very night, Nicole took action. Without telling anyone, not even leaving a trace in her search history or notes, She quietly opened a backup copy of her photos from an old hard drive that had once belonged to Leslie. She remembered Leslie asking her to save a bunch of photos from her old camera when the memory was full. They were all seemingly mundane moments. Parties, short trips, scenes from everyday life, but Nicole no longer looked at them the same way. She studied every face caught in the lens, every shadow that passed behind her, every casual glance that passed Leslie from a distance. And then she stopped. A man stood a few feet away from Leslie, his face indistinct but his tall build, his cold gaze, and the way he turned his head when the camera caught his eye froze Nicole. Though the photo was old and the colors were faded, she was almost certain. It was Carlton. Her heart was pounding, not with surprise but with a chill, as if all the most terrifying theories in her head were now finding their first confirmation. Nicole didn't stop there. She opened the old contacts on Leslie's phone, which she had backed up when her friend had asked her to change the settings, and she started looking up names one by one. No one was named Carlton, but there was one contact labeled C. A single letter, no avatar, but more than 70 calls in the last 2 months Leslie had been near her. She wrote down the number, transferred it to an unregistered secondary phone. And at that moment, a text message came to the device from that number. A single line, "Stop. This is your final warning." Nicole's hand tightened on the phone, sweat pouring from her face, even though she was in a closed room. Couldn't be a coincidence. That person knew she was investigating. That person was watching. The only thing that kept her from falling apart was that the person hadn't cut her off immediately, which meant there was still something unfinished. Carlton, or whoever was playing him, wanted her to move on, but to follow the path they'd laid out. Nicole knew she was walking into a maze where any turn could be a trap. But she didn't back down. She began to observe Carlton more, his every move, his schedule, his timely absences, his short, sub-minute calls. She hired a professional stalker, asking for no questions, no contact, just evidence. 3 days later, the stalker sent back a file of photos. Carlton entering an old apartment complex on the edge of town, with no public cameras, no reliable phone signal. But the photo that froze Nicole wasn't Carlton. It was the woman who appeared immediately afterward. The messy curls, the piercing eyes, the unmistakable gait. Leslie. She didn't disappear. She had never been away, and she was clearly working with or controlling Carlton. The question was no longer, are they in contact? But, what are they planning and when? Nicole knew she couldn't confront them head-on. What they were doing was beyond the scope of normal legal scrutiny. This was no longer a personal vendetta. This was a campaign aimed at total destruction, reputation, morale, even survival. Somehow Leslie had dragged Carlton into it, or they had been together. But what if the person next to her, Carlton, was the knife to her throat? What if Ted himself was wavering, doubting, and cold? If Nicole isn't faster, isn't she smarter? She'll not only lose everything, but also become the main character in a case she didn't create, but was made up exactly as if she were the culprit.